أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بمولانا بعبد الله الحسين عليه السلام. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين، والذين اذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والصولة الحيدرية والعصمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والعبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكادمية والحجج الرضوية والجود التقوية والنقابة النكوية والحيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية. The night is Laylatul Ashura, the night which within the traditions has been called the night of Tasu'a. This is that night that Sayyid al-Shuhada requested for this night. On the 9th of Muharram, the army of Umar bin Sa'd begins to go and attack the tents of Sayyid al-Shuhada. As that army, it approaches the tents, Imam al-Husayn sends Aba Fadl Abbas, he sends Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, he sends Habib ibn Madahir, and he tells them, see that have these individuals changed their mind about not attacking. When they go to the army of Umar bin Sa'd, the army says the order has come for us to attack the tents. When Aba Fadl Abbas returns to inform Sayyid al-Shuhada, the Imam says, "O Abbas, see if they can delay for one night. لَعَلَّنَا نُصَلِّي رَبَّنَا وَنَدْعُوهُ وَنَسْتَغْفِرُهُ." So that upon this night we can pray to our Lord, we can make dua, and we can do istighfar upon this night. This night, if you think about the day of Ashura, the day of Ashura was anticipated by prophet after prophet. Have you ever seen a tragedy where people wait for that tragedy? Have you ever seen a sorrow that people, they wait to mourn for that sorrow? That sorrow is something which we seek to avoid. But the moment the first of Muharram comes, we wait for this night, we wait for the day of Ashura. Because this is that night that Fatima Zahra would weep about this night. That when Rasulullah says to Zahra that, "Oh Zahra, your Hussein will be Shaheed, O Zahra." Zahra was a mother, wasn't she? She says, "Oh Rasulullah, on that day will I be there?" Rasulullah says, "No, you won't be there." And then she says, "Oh Rasulullah, will you be there?" Rasulullah says, "I won't be there." She says, "Will Ali, will Hassan?" Rasulullah says, "No, they won't be there." Then Zahra, she says a question. She says, "Oh Rasulullah, then who will mourn for my Hussein?" You know what the Prophet says? The Prophet says, Allah will create a nation that whose elders will mourn for the elders of Hussein, and whose children will mourn for the children of Hussein. You know, one of the secrets behind why you wait for this night is that you recognize that these are those nights through which the promise of Rasulullah to Fatima to Zahra is fulfilled through your tears. You see, I was thinking that what can I say about Sayyid al-Shuhada on this night? One salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. If I could request the media team to raise the volume, and then after that, don't alter the volume after raising it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And one salawat for each of these volunteers, whether it's those in the media room, whether it's those who are sacrificing and standing outside, or those who prepared the niyaz in the khidmah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, for them one salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You see, I was thinking that on this night, that what can we say about Sayyid al-Shuhada? You know, that Hussein, who at a very young age, by the age of 4 and 5, he showed us that he wasn't like anyone else. Within the tradition, it's stated that when Sayyid al-Shuhada is just a child, Jibreel and Mikael, they descend on Rasulullah and they say, "Oh Rasulullah, is Hussein willing to make that promise that he will sacrifice himself for your deen, O Rasulullah?" You see, that Hussein as a child who made that promise, that how are we going to understand Hussein on this day of Ashura? You see, tonight is the last lecture. After this, there's one majlis, which is a shorter majlis, the Ziyara majlis. But within this series, I made my effort that whatever we mention of the Imams, we mention from their ziyarat, we mention from their du'as, we mention from those hadith and those sermons which everyone has accepted. Because who will understand Sayyid al-Shuhada besides the sons of Sayyid al-Shuhada? And tonight, before I come to Masaib, there's only one line which I want to examine. It's stated that within one of the traditions that Mufid he writes, that a companion comes to Imam al-Sadiq, and when he comes to Imam al-Sadiq, he says, "Oh Imam, how can I do the ziyarah of your grandfather Hussein from afar?" And Imam al-Sadiq gives this individual a ziyarah. And within that ziyarah, there is a line which is an ocean of understanding into Sayyid al-Shuhada. And that is that line that when Imam al-Sadiq addresses Imam al-Husayn, he says, "Assalamu alayka ya rahmatullah al-wasi'a." That, "O Hussein, you are that expansive mercy of Allah." And tonight the analysis is that what does this line mean? That we say Hussein is the expansive mercy of Allah. You see, the first thing we understand from this line is that our need to hold on to Sayyid al-Shuhada is like our need to attain the mercy of Allah. That mercy of Allah, that when you look in the Quran, 113 out of 114 chapters begin by mentioning the mercy of Allah. That mercy of Allah, that the only attribute of Allah mentioned next to the name Allah was the name Rahman. When the Quran says, قُلِ ادْعُوا اللَّهَ أَوِ ادْعُوا الرَّحْمَنَ أَيَّمَّا تَدْعُوا فَلَهُ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى, that wherever, that when you call upon Him, call upon Allah or call upon the one who is infinitely compassionate, the one who has mercy. You see, the first mercy which Allah has given to every human being, that because of this mercy you should never be hopeless, is the mercy of existence. You see, in every language, you find the word for soul, and the soul is that which gives life. The soul has had a word which is related to breathing. In Arabic, the soul is called nafs. This is related to nafas, breathing. Or it's called ruh, which is related to raha, which means to blow. In the English language, the word soul comes from suke in Greek, which means breathing. Allah is showing that, O mankind, that which is given existence towards this world is my mercy and my rahmah. The first individual to despair of the rahmah of Allah was Iblis. You see, Satan is a common noun. The name of Shaitan was Iblis. And what Iblis means is that person who is despaired of the mercy of Allah. The moment you become hopeless, you have taken that first step down the path of Shaitan. But the person who has been given existence is never hopeless. And when you look at the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, you find they would incite hopes into the hearts of their followers. That what did Sayyid al-Shuhada do time and time again? When Hur comes to Imam al-Husayn, Hur is the one who stopped the caravan of Sayyid al-Shuhada. But when Hur comes on that morning of Ashura, on a night like this, Hur, he comes with his arms tied to the Imam. You see, the Hur, he taught us that when you come to the door of Ahlul Bayt, you come with adab and etiquette to their doorstep. And when Hur comes with etiquette to the doorstep of the Imam, that he says, "O Imam, halli ila tawba min sabil," that is there a path and a way for me to be forgiven? You know what Sayyid al-Shuhada says? Sayyid al-Shuhada at that moment says, "O Hur, not only have I forgiven you, but Allah has forgiven you. And you are truly hur and free as your mother had named you." You know, if you go to a scholar and you say to him that I did a sin, can you give me an act by which I can gain forgiveness? The most he'll say is, don't go back to that sin. Recite this prayer, recite this dua, and insha'Allah, Allah will forgive you. That scholar can't say Allah has forgiven you. But when Hur comes to the doorstep of Sayyid al-Shuhada, only the Imam can say, not only have I forgiven you, O Hur, Allah has forgiven you. You see, each of these companions, their tawheed was Husayn. They would look towards Husayn. Every one of them knew of the fawaid of saying La ilaha illallah in their final moments. But nowhere in the maqatil is it written that anyone say this line in their final moments. If they said anything in their final moments, they said Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Or they said alayka minni salam. These are those companions. They recognize that when we look at Hussein, to obey Hussein is to obey Allah. There is no contradiction between Imam centricity and God centricity. That these are both within the same reality. You see, Sayyid al-Shuhada time and time again, he would remind them of the reality of the mercy of Allah. On his journey to Karbala, there was an individual by the name of Hur ibn Abdullah al-Ju'fi. This individual, the Imam says, come and join my side. Sayyid al-Shuhada wanted these individuals to attain paradise. He wanted them to attain a status whereby when you recite ziyarah, you say, Assalamu alaikum ya ansara din Allah. That you are the supporters of the religion of Allah. When he goes to this man, he says, come and support me. You know what that man, he says? He says, I have a horse which is faster than any other horse. And I have a sword, the likes of which is no other. But the Imam shows his concern wasn't to gather wealth or to get material things which would help him in the battle. The Imam could have taken the horse. But the Imam says, no, I don't want any of these things. I want you to join my side. You know, on the day of Ashura, when Imam al-Husayn is preaching to that army, even after the shahadat of many of his companions, he says to them, I am the grandson of Rasulullah. I am the nephew of Hamza. My uncle was Ja'far al-Tayyar. My father was Ali bin Abi Talib. I say, did these people not know this is the grandson of Rasulullah? Each of them knew who Imam al-Husayn was. Each of them knew the consequences of standing against Sayyid al-Shuhada. But the reason the Imam reminds them was out of the mercy within his heart, that perhaps these individuals, by killing him, they won't subjugate themselves to the fire of hell, and perhaps they'll come towards paradise. You see, this is Imam al-Husayn rahmatullah al-wasi'ah. But at the second level, when you look at this title of the Imam, who is the Imam the grandson of? He is the grandson of the one that when Allah described him in the Quran, He says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. That I am not sending him except for you, who is a mercy for mankind. You see, Rasulullah very famously says, Husaynun minni wa ana min al-Husayn. That Husayn is from me and I am from Husayn. Have you ever reflected, how can a grandson be from his grandfather? At the end of the day, you find this line, it makes sense. A grandson can be from his grandfather. But how can a grandfather be from his grandson? The first level of this hadith is that Rasulullah is saying that in my nature, whatever I stood for, Hussein stands for. If I am a rahma, Hussein is a rahma. But at the second level, he is saying that on the day of Ashura, if you cut the neck of Hussein on that day, in reality, you're not just cutting the neck of Hussein, you're cutting the neck of Rasulullah. And Rasulullah shows that the moment this grandson of mine stands up for my deen, from this moment I am from Hussein. And anyone who holds on to Hussein has held on to I, Rasulullah. You see, the name of Rasulullah was that name which signified the victory of Ahlul Bayt. Even in the court of Yazid, when Imam Zainul Abidin gives his khutbah, and he says, Anabnu Makkah wal Mina, I am the son of Makkah and Mina. Anabnu Zamzam was Safa, I am the son of Zamzam and Safa. Anabnu Man Humil al Buraku al Hawa, I am the son of the one whom Burak took towards the heavens. Anabnu Man Usriya bihi ila min al Masjid al Haram ila al Masjid al Aqsa, I am the one who was taken from Masjid al Haram to Masjid al Aqsa. Anabnu Man Dana fatadalla fakana qaba qawsayn aw adna, I am the son of the one who reached so close to Allah, it's as if he was 2 bows length or closer. Imam Zainul Abidin is reminding those individuals that whatever reality of Rasulullah was, we are a continuation of that reality. And as he gives this khutbah, the man, he calls the adhan. When the adhan goes off, they say, O Sajjad, have you won or have you lost? You know what Imam Zainul Abidin says? He says, when you listen to this adhan and you hear the name of our grandfather Muhammad, at that moment, know we have won. You see, he's reminding that this is the reality of my grandfather. And if this is the reality of my grandfather of mercy, how did my grandfather mention my father Hussein? That Imam al-Husayn is on the shoulders of Rasulullah. And as Imam al-Husayn is on the shoulders of Rasulullah, a man in Medina says, O Hussein, how great is your savari, how great is your ride? Imam al-Husayn replies by, Rasulullah says, that don't ask how great is the ride of Imam al-Husayn, but rather ask how great is the Raqib and the rider at this moment. That this is Sayyid al-Shuhada. That when Imam al-Husayn enters the mosque, Rasulullah gets off the mimbar for Husayn. When Imam al-Husayn comes on the back of Rasulullah, he extends that sajda. I say, oh Rasulullah, salat is for Allah. Salat is not a personal matter. Rasulullah would reply by saying that if I am extending this salat, it's for my ummah to recognize that Hussein is that one. To respect Hussein is to give respect to the deen of Allah. That this is Imam al-Husayn. Husaynun minni wa ana min al-Husayn. You see, within this hadith, there are two types of virtues. One virtue is that virtue you acquire because of your family. But the other virtue is because of your efforts. You know, on the day of Ashura, when Imam al-Husayn says about Ali Akbar, فَقَدْ بَرَزَ إِلَيْهِمْ غُلَامٌ أَشْبَهُ النَّاسِ خَلْقًا وَخُلْقًا وَمَنْطِقًا بِرَسُولِكَ, that I am sending that young man who in his appearance and his speech and his character resembled Rasulullah to look like Rasulullah was something which was given to Ali Akbar. But the effort of Ali Akbar was to make his character like Rasulullah. That when Rasulullah says, Hussein is from me, this is an honor which is given to Sayyid al-Shuhada. But when he says that I am from Hussein, this was the effort of Sayyid al-Shuhada. That this Imam is that one whose lineage was like nobody else's. You know, there's a tradition. When Sayyid al-Shuhada is a child, he says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, oh my father, who is greater, you or I? Imam al-Husayn knew the answer, but he wanted us to understand some realities. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, oh Husayn, I am greater. You know what Sayyid al-Shuhada says? He says, oh my grandfather, oh my father, tell me one thing. Who was greater, my grandfather or your grandfather? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, oh Husayn, your grandfather was greater than anyone else. Imam al-Husayn says that your father was Abu Talib, but my father is Ali. Whose father is greater, mine or yours? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, your father is greater. Imam al-Husayn says, your mother was Fatima bint Asad. My mother is Fatima Sayyidatun Nisa al-Alameen. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, your mother is greater. The Imam says, your brother was Ja'far al-Tayyar from amongst your brothers. But my brother is Hassan al-Mujtaba. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, your brother is greater. Then he says, oh Hussein, in terms of virtue, I, Ali, am greater. But in terms of lineage, there is no lineage in relations like yours, O Hussein. You see, one virtue from his family, the other virtue, his sacrifice on the day of Ashura. This is the one who is Rahmatullah al-Wasi'ah. But you know, one more reason why Sayyid al-Shuhada is called Rahmatullah al-Wasi'ah is that he is the one that when you come to his doorstep, Allah gives his mercy at the doorstep of Hussein. You know, there's a story of Allam al-Hilli. It's stated that Allam al-Hilli had two questions. The first question he had is that, was it true that if you go to Masjid al-Sahla 40 Tuesday nights, will you meet the Imam of your time? And the second question Allam al-Hilli had is that, how can this be a hadith of Rasulullah, that the sins the size of the wings of a mosquito for Hussein can forget, that tears the size of a wing of a mosquito for Hussein can forgive sins the size of an ocean? That how can these tears forgive this many sins? Allam al-Hilli narrates that on the 40th Tuesday night, as I returned from Masjid al-Sahla, as I was going, I meet a man. And that man, he says that, where are you going? He said, I am returning from Masjid al-Sahla after going there for 40 nights. That man, he said, why would you go to Masjid al-Sahla for 40 nights? Imam al-Hilli said, I wanted to know, is it true that I'll meet the Imam of my time? And I wanted to understand this hadith about these tears for about Abdullah forgiving sins the size of an ocean. That man says to Imam al-Hilli, that, oh man, there was once a king who had gotten lost while he was hunting. And as he had gotten lost while he was hunting, he came to the doorstep of a lady. And when he came to the doorstep of that lady was a poor individual. When she saw the king said to her, oh lady, I've gotten lost. Is there any food? Is there any water for me? At that moment, without hesitation, that lady said, our one sheep, sacrifice it for this man and feed this man. You see, that man, after he had eaten the king, he returns to his kingdom. A number of years go by. After a number of years, that lady and her son show up into the court of that king. When they show up into the court of that king, they say, "O king, do you remember us?" The king says, "How can I forget you? You are those individuals who helped me in my time of need." They said, "Can you help us? It is a time of drought and famine." You know what that king he does? He looks to his advisors. He says, "What should I give this lady and her son?" One of the advisors says, "Give them an amount of money." The king says, "This is unjust. They had one animal. They sacrificed it for me. Money wouldn't be a just reward for them." He looks at another advisor. Another advisor says, "Give half your kingdom." The king says, "No, they gave away everything. Me giving away half a kingdom is not enough." At that point, the king says, "My entire rule and dominion I give to you and your son." That man looks at Imam al-Hilli. He says, "Oh Imam al-Hilli, for the sacrifice of one sheep, if a normal king can give his entire kingdom, do you not think that Allah, the King of Kings, will give his mercy for the sacrifice of Husayn?" That king sacrificed one sheep. Sayyid al-Shuhada sacrificed everything for Allah on the day of Ashura. And if you want to know that what is the status of serving Sayyid al-Shuhada, there is an ajib and a strange verse within the Quran that if you reflect on it, you'll find that what is this verse saying? You know what that verse says? That verse is from Surah Zumar. In Surah Zumar, Allah says in one verse, وَسِيقَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِلَى جَهَنَّمَ زُمَرًا, that on the day of judgment, Allah will drag the inhabitants of hell into the fire. Now that makes sense, because if you're going to a place you don't want to go, Allah will drag you over there. But the next verse it says, وَسِيقَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا رَبَّهُمْ إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ زُمَرًا, that there will be a group of pious individuals that Allah will drag them to paradise. Now what does this mean? You would think that when the doors of heaven open, you would run to the doors of heaven. Why is it that somebody needs to be dragged in towards heaven? When you look at the narrations of Ahlul Bayt found in Kamil al-Ziyarat, you find Imam al-Sadiq says, this verse is for the khuddam and the servants of Sayyid al-Shuhada. They said, "Oh Imam al-Sadiq, what do you mean?" Imam al-Sadiq says that those individuals who served Imam al-Husayn on the day of judgment, before they enter paradise, Allah will say, "O Khuddam al-Husayn, do you want to see the face of your master, Aba Abdullah?" At that moment, they'll look at the face of Aba Abdullah, and they'll be so mesmerized by the face of Aba Abdullah. When the angels say, "Udkhuli Jannah," that enter paradise, at that moment, they won't want to move from Imam al-Husayn. So Allah will force them to enter paradise, otherwise they would sit by the feet of Sayyid al-Shuhada. You see, this is Imam al-Husayn, Rahmatullah al-Wasi'a, Sayyid al-Shuhada. And one of those means that he's Rahmatullah al-Wasi'a is through shedding the tears for Imam al-Husayn. That these tears are a medium to reach Allah. And especially on a night like this night of Laylatul Ashura. You know, it's stated on this night, Imam al-Husayn divided this night into 3 portions. One was for the ibadat of Allah. The other was for his companions. And the third was for his Ahlul Bayt. It's stated on this night that when anyone would go near the tents of Ali Muhammad, they would hear the recitation of the Quran like the buzzing of the bees on this night. And as Sayyid al-Shuhada, after he would recite the Quran, you find he would go towards his companions and he would say to Dhahak and his other companions that, "You see those mountains over there? Take a member of my family, each of you, and you go towards those mountains." At that moment, the Ahlul Bayt of Rasulullah, they say, "O Hussein, O our master, what will we do after you? What is the point of this life after you, O Hussein?" Imam al-Husayn then would look at the sons of Aqil. He would say, "O sons of Aqil, the shahadat of Muslim is enough. You don't have to sacrifice yourself." They say, "O Sayyid al-Shuhada, until our final breaths we are with you." After that, Imam al-Husayn would look towards his companions. He would say, "O Abbas, extinguish the candle, that maybe some of them are embarrassed of leaving, O Abbas. And O Abbas, they can leave in the darkness of the night." The moment Aba Fadl Abbas, he brings the candle back, all of those companions are standing there. All of them, as they're standing there, they begin to testify their faith to Sayyid al-Shuhada. That you find Zuhair ibn al-Qayn says, "Oh my master, even if they kill me and burn my body and scatter my ashes and they bring me to life and do this 1,000 times, every time I'll sacrifice myself for you, O Hussein." After that, Imam al-Husayn would go past the tents of his Ahlul Bayt. And as he would go past the tents of his Ahlul Bayt, on a night like this, each of the women would speak to their beloved. The Layla would speak to Ali Akbar, and Farwa would speak to Qasim, and Zainab would say, "Oh, on and Muhammad, tomorrow when you reach the Furat, make sure you don't drink until the children of Hussein have drunk water." As each of the women would speak to their children, there was one sister of Hussein who would cry on this night, and that sister was Kulthum. You know what Kulthum would say? She would say, "I don't have any children to sacrifice for my brother. If only I had any children." At that moment, Aba Fadl Abbas couldn't handle his sister crying. He says, "Oh Bibi, I'll be the sacrifice on your behalf." I say, "Oh Abbas, if you couldn't handle Kulthum crying on this night, what about on Sham Ghariba? as these women would go from the tents to tent on that night when the shirt of Sakina would catch on fire, O Abbas. As Sayyid al-Shuhada, he's going past the tents of the women. He comes to the tent of Sayyida Zainab. Sayyida Zainab, she says, "Oh my brother, have you tested these companions?" The riwayat says, Habib ibn Madahir heard this conversation. Habib says, "Oh Nafi, gather the companions in front of the tent of Sayyida Zainab." All of the companions with their swords within their hand, they go to the tent of Sayyida Zainab and they say, "Oh daughter of Ali, if you tell us to cut our necks at this moment, we'll cut our necks and we'll place them in front of your tent, O daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen." But as this night would continue, it's also stated in the riwayat, there was one mother who would speak to her 6-month infant, and that mother was Rabab. You know the martyrdom of Ali Asghar? There was one alim who would say, the martyrdom of Ali Akbar showed that there was not a Muslim in the army of Yazid. But the martyrdom of the 6-month Ali Asghar showed that there was no one with humanity and insaniya within that army. You know, it's stated that when one of the companions came to Imam al-Sadiq, he says, "Oh Imam al-Sadiq, I have a hajat." The Imam said, "Recite 2 units of prayer, and after reciting 2 units of prayer, say, Allahumma inni unshiduka bidamil madloom." That, "Oh Allah, I ask you through the right of that oppressed blood." The companion says, "That is this the blood of Husayn? Is this the blood of Amir al-Mu'mineen?" Imam al-Sadiq says, "No, this is the blood of the 6-month infant of Sayyid al-Shuhada." You know, Allama Naraki would say that that infant of Hussein was so young that when that arrow was fired towards the neck of that infant didn't know whether to smile or cry after that arrow. The Masaib of Ali Asghar. You know, the Masaib of Ali Asghar is that only Masaib where Imam al-Husayn says, "I wish you saw the Masaib of Ali Asghar." The Imam says, "Shiati, laytakum fi yawmi ashura jamiyan tanduruni, kayfa astasqi li tifli, fa abaw an yarhamuni." He says, "Oh my Shia, I wish you saw me on the day of Ashura, how I was asking for water for my infant. Instead of water, an arrow was fired towards Ali Asghar." You know, Ayatollah Muhammad Hussain Isfahani, he writes a line of poetry in Arabic. You know what he writes in Arabic? He says, "Oh my master Hussein, what will you tell Rabab when Rabab asks you, why is that white kurta of Asghar the same color as a stone of Akhiq? Then why is that shirt of Asghar, why is it red in that color?" The day of Ashura came. The arms of Abbas were cut. The body of Qasim was broken to pieces. An arrow went into the chest of Ali Akbar. Imam al-Husayn stands alone. He begins to look into the maqtal. He says, "Nadara ila yamine wa shimale." The Imam looks to the right. He looks to the left. He sees none of his companions are there. If you want to understand how alone Sayyid al-Shuhada was, he begins to speak to the bodies of his companions. Mali unadikum fala tujibun. Oh Habib, why is it you don't reply to the call of Hussein? After that, Imam al-Husayn says those lines, Ala hal min nasirin yansurana. Is there anyone to help me? Ala hal min dabin yadubbu an harami Rasulullah. Is there anyone to help the women of Rasulullah? The moment Sayyid al-Shuhada says these lines, cries begin to come from the tents of the women. They began to say, Wa Muhammada, Wa Aliya, Wa Hamzata, Wa Ja'fara. Imam al-Husayn says, Oh Zainab, why are you crying? I am still alive. Sayyidah Zainab says, Oh Hussein, the moment you made that call, your 6-month infant fell from the cradle to the ground. Imam al-Husayn, he takes Ali Asghar, Sayyid al-Shuhada, look towards me. You know how Imam al-Husayn would take Asghar towards the Maqtal? He would cover Ali Asghar from the sun. After all, Ali Asghar was a 6-month infant. You know, it's stated, the army of Umar bin Saad thought that Hussein had brought the Quran to intercede for him. But no, Hussein brought that chapter of the Quran on Natiq and the speaking Quran. You know, when Sayyid al-Shuhada, he comes out holding Ali Asghar, this is that point where the hearts of everyone began to break. You know, when Mukhtar, he would catch those who did the crimes at Karbala, he would ask each of them, what did you do on the day of Ashura? You know, for example, Mukhtar, he catches a man. He says, oh man, what is your name? He says, my name is Bajdal. Mukhtar says, what did you do on the day of Ashura? Bajdal, he says, that when the body of Hussein was on the ground, everyone was looting the body of Hussein. Somebody would take the shirt of Hussein. Somebody would take the sword of Hussein. Somebody would take the sandals of Hussein. I saw that on the hand of Hussein was a ring. I wanted that ring. When I went to the body of Hussein, I tried to pull the ring, it wouldn't come off. At that moment, I took my dagger. I cut the finger of Hussein. Mukhtar, after that, he catches a man. He says, oh man, what is your name? He says, my name is Ibn Khalik. Mukhtar says, oh Ibn Khalik, you are a hard-hearted individual. Was there ever a point that you cried on the day of Ashura? He says, there was one point that not only did I cry, but the entire army of Umar bin Saad began to cry. He says, that is the moment when Hussein had his 6-month infant within his arm. Everyone began to cry. Umar bin Saad says, Iftaqalam al-Husayn. Oh Hurmala, stop the words of Hussein. Hurmala picks up the arrow. He puts it down. He picks it up again. He puts it down. He does this a 3rd time. At that point, Umar bin Saad says, oh Hurmala, if somebody asked me who is the most hard-hearted within my army, I would say it is you, oh Hurmala. Oh Hurmala, why don't you fire the arrow to the infant of Hussein? Hurmala says, oh Umar bin Saad, you don't see what I see. Every time I want to fire the arrow, I see a lady dressed in black. She says that the son of my son is Madloom. You find Hurmala, he fires the arrow. Min al-udhani ila-udhan. You know, the riwayah, they differ. The narrations, they differ. One narration says The arrow went from one ear of Ali Asghar to the other ear of Ali Asghar. The other narration says into the neck of Ali Asghar. There was one alim in Najaf. They said to him, "O Sayyid, which riwayah is true?" He said, "Both the narrations are true." When Hurmala fired his arrow, it wasn't an arrow with one point at the end. It was an arrow with 3 points. One went through the neck of Asghar. One went through the ear of Asghar. Sayyid al-Shuhada, he holds the blood of Ali Asghar. Imam al-Husayn, he puts the blood of Asghar upon his face. As the blood of Asghar is on the face of Husayn, now that point it comes. How is a father supposed to tell a mother that her infant has been killed? 7 steps forward, 7 steps backwards. The Imam says, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, ridan bi qada'ihi wa tasliman li amri." Imam al-Husayn, he buries Ali Asghar. Mir Anisi writes, "Nannisi qabr qod ke, असगर को गाड़ के उठ खड़े हुए शब्बीर दामन को झाड़ के." After burying the tiny grave of Ali Asghar, Sayyid al-Shuhada stands up. But I wish this is where the Masaib of Ali Asghar would stop. On the night of Sham-e-Ghariba, you find as they're counting the heads of the Shuhada, they notice the head of Ali Asghar isn't there. One Maloon, he says that Hussein had buried his infant. The riwayah, it says 4 horse riders, they begin to go towards the tents of Hussein. As they're going towards the tents of Hussein, they put their arrows into the ground. One point it comes. As they go towards the tents of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Sayyida Zainab says, "O Fizza, take a rabab inside, O Fizza." That moment it comes, that man, he goes to the tent of Sayyid al-Shuhada. He places his arrow into the ground. On the other end of the arrow was the body of Ali Asghar. He raises his dagger. As he raises his dagger, he takes it to the neck of Ali Asghar. They place the neck of it, they put the head of Ali Asghar on it. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawm al-dhalim. You know, in Sham, when the head of Ali Asghar was brought in front of Rabab, Rabab said one line which was enough for Musibah. You know what Rabab said when she saw the head of Ali Asghar? Rabab, she looks at the head of her infant and she says, "Ya Asghar, amithluka tunhar ya Ali Asghar." Oh Ali Asghar, do they even slaughter children like you, Ali Asghar? You slaughter animals, you don't slaughter children in this manner. There's many individuals who have du'as. There are many individuals who are sick and ailing. Tonight is the night of Laylatul Ashura. We say, "Oh Allah," through the madlumi of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Ya Allah, through the ghurba of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Ya Allah, through that thirst of Sayyid al-Shuhada, that wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt are in difficulty, help them. Wherever they're sick and ailing, cure them. Wherever they're in need of hajat, granted towards them. You know, when a Rabab came towards Karbala on the day of the Arba'een of Sayyid al-Shuhada, and she saw the grave of Imam al-Husayn, Rabab said that as long as I am alive, I'll sit by the grave of Hussein. You know, Imam Zainul Abidin, when he heard this, he said, "Oh Mother Rabab, what will you do by the grave of Hussein?" Rabab said that whenever the Zaireen they come, I'll tell them that spot where an arrow was fired to Ali Asghar. I'll tell them about that spot where the grave of my master Hussein is there. But Imam Zainul Abidin says, "Oh Mother Rabab, I won't leave you in Karbala. Oh, come with me to Medina." You know, Rabab, when she comes to Medina, she had made a promise that as long as she was alive, never would she drink cold water, and never would she go under the shade. She would spend her life under the burning sun. You find a point had come within the life of Rabab that she had become very ill. You find Sayyida Zainab comes to Imam Zainul Abidin. She says, "Oh Zainul Abidin, tell your mother to go under the shadows. Tell your mother this isn't good for her. Tell your mother to take care of her health." Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, "Oh Rabab, the time has come for you to stop this. Go under the shadow." You find Rabab, she says, "Are you asking me as the Imam, or are you asking me as my son?" Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, "I am asking as the Imam of the time." She said, "I had promised my master his body laid in the plains of Karbala. As long as Rabab is alive, Rabab will be under the burning sun." It's stated before she goes underneath the shade, she falls on the ground. Imam Zainul Abidin says, "Inna lillahi wa inna